All right, hello everyone. Welcome back. It's that time of the week. It's time for some more One Hub Racing. It's P3 tier here at 7 o'clock on a Friday night, and we get ready for round 4 and the halfway point of this season 21 championship. As always, I am joined by ERT Toma and Imola. A lot of turns where there aren't many overtaking opportunities, but a very long DRS straight on the pit straight. Do you think we could be in for an exciting one with a lot of overtakes?
Yeah, Imola, like you said, there's not a lot of overtaking spots, but the overtaking spots that Imola does have are very, a lot of action come out of those turns, especially into turn 1 and turn 2. So I'm hoping we see a lot of action in those areas, and maybe a few dive bombs in other areas of the tracks as well.
Yeah, and it's very important here, at least I think it's very important at this track to be extremely consistent, because there's spin the car, get track invalidations, get those 3-second time penalties in the race, and that's pretty much what's going to cost you. So you need to make sure you're keeping it consistent out on track. You're getting good lap. Microphone keeps disconnecting there. But yeah, like I was saying, if you could hear me, I was talking about consistency and how that's pretty much everything around this track. As you know, if you make a spin, you're losing a couple of seconds. Obviously, that's like every track, but this track is especially crucial with the track limits, because being a short track, you really need to push the limits to find the lap time, and overall that's what's going to get you warnings and 3-second time penalties. An interesting thing to note actually is that ESW Hooky and Speed Quinn are both taking engine penalties in this race. Obviously their engines have gotten quite worn, because I'm pretty sure they've attended all 3 races so far. So their engines are quite worn. They're now thinking, this is the time that I want to take my engine penalty. Maybe for them it's their strong track, they think they can overtake, or maybe they're weaker at this track and they wouldn't be expecting to get into the points anyway, and that is why they're taking their grid penalty here. Whatever the reason is, it'll be interesting to see how they do from the back of the grid. But right now, we're riding on board with Lawrence D. And as you can see there, like I was saying about the track limits, he just goes wide coming into Aqua Minerale, and that has invalidated his lap time. So he now needs to either recharge the ERS and cool down the tyres and go for another lap, or come back into the pit lane and get himself a new set of soft compound tyres. We have our first times coming in now. We have Gabri, who sets a 1 minute 17.3, decent time from the Williams driver, although I'm sure we will definitely see improvement with track evolution and obviously just improving their times in general. ERT Thomas in the Mercedes sets a 17.4, but yeah, like I was saying before, we obviously have Cynex. Yeah, he actually retired there. I think it was a spin in the middle sector, and he is retired from the session. Speed Quinn now retiring from the session, as they have to take their engine penalty. But yeah, so Cynex, Speed Quinn and Hooky all will not be setting lap times. So do you think it could be maybe a bit more of an interesting dynamic at the front and the battle for pole position?
Definitely, because I believe Cynex got his win last week, and so seeing him retiring so early in this session, he's going to be putting himself at the back. So seeing if he can carry his momentum from winning last week into finding himself maybe hoping to do Max Verstappen at Spa this past weekend. So hoping he can bring up that bit of that momentum from his win last week into pushing himself back up into the top step again.
Yeah, and like you said, he won last time out at Brazil, if I'm not mistaken. So that was a great performance from him, because we haven't really seen him up there. Well, in the first 2 rounds, at least, we haven't really seen him battling for wins. Obviously, Kong Hofner was doing really well at the start of the season, but I think he's just dropped off that little bit in maybe pace and consistency, especially in the qualifying, as we all know. But a lot of important names in the championship battle haven't actually been able to make it to tonight's race, a few of which Gazaman hasn't been able to make it, and also Kong Hofner isn't here either. So, those are two big names in this championship battle. Two guys that we've been seeing battling up there quite a bit. But in Austria, obviously we've had 3 race winners. That's Kong Hoffner, M. Pricey, and ERT Thomas, 2 of which are here tonight. So they could be in the championship battle. M. Pricey in the Haas, just like he was in Austria. And I definitely think we'll be seeing him battle it out for pole position. Racing Bomber, though, manages to set a 16.4. So he is pacey right out of the pit lane. And he's just beaten ERT Thomas's time by 0.7 of a second. So he's done quite nicely for himself on that banker time. He'll most likely be doing another 2 laps in this session. So he's got plenty of time to find improvement on that 16.4. And we could possibly see him getting into the 1 minute 15s. But it looks like ERT Jordan, I don't think he's on a lap. If he was, he just invalidated Rich 500. I think this is actually his first appearance in this tier. I don't think we've seen him for the first 3 rounds. He's hopping into the McLaren for this Imola Grand Prix. And let's see how fast he can go on his first qualifying lap of the session. Into Aqua Minerali we go. And you can see hitting that double right-hander apex quite nicely for himself. Carrying the speed, but also getting a good apex up the hill. And then we come into the very tight chicane in the final sector, and managing to do that quite nicely. You want to be taking a lot of that sausage curb, try to cut as much as you can get away with, and then we just have the final 2 turns to go. You can see just kissing that apex, doesn't want to ride it as it can definitely unsettle the car. It goes a little bit wide into that final turn, but does give him a slightly better exit, and across the line it is going to be a 1 minute 16.7. So for a first appearance so far, got 10 minutes left in the session, and he's only 0.3 off of pole position. So, yeah, Rich quite close to Racing Bomber. Obviously, a guy who's been up there in quite a few of the rounds. Do you think Rich could possibly be in this battle for pole position? Do you think there could possibly be big things to be expected from him?
Definitely, because I believe Rich is a past driver in One Hub, and he's kind of seen himself around the precision tier when we've had it. Which would be the second tier. It would be P2 now, I guess. And also we have seen drivers like just come out of nowhere. For example, Pricey in Austria just come out and make themselves known, get a race win under their belt, immediately prove themselves, send a bit of a message to the rest of the drivers. So I entirely believe it is possible that Ridge could be another case of that. Just another name in the hat of who could win this title, possibly.
Yeah, definitely. But here in One Hub Racing, obviously we have very short seasons, only 8 rounds in the season. This is obviously the midway point as we're on round 4 of this championship. So we're getting quite close to the end, and it only feels like we've just begun. So yeah, these drivers need to be scoring as much points as possible every single round, because every single round really crucial, as you only get 8 of them, so you need to use them wisely. You can see Gabri goes into the 16s with a 16.3, so you can tell their banker obviously wasn't very representative, and they've gone quite a bit quicker, about a second quicker if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I think definitely could have made some mistakes on that banker, but it looks like Racing Bomber is now going for his second lap of the session. The 16.3 set by Gabri is the time to beat, so let's see if Racing Bomber can get close. Coming into the first chicane of turn 1 and 2, just kissing these apexes. You don't really want to touch those sausage curbs on the inside of the apexes, as it can unsettle your car and also just make you go slower through the turns. You can see he carried a lot of minimum speed and got a good exit out of that second chicane. Up the hill now, you can see actually riding that curb on the inside line. Very risky, as it can send your car spinning sometimes, but he manages to hold his car in place. You can see into here though, that's an example of losing the car, and you can see he just was carrying 5th gear through there when he usually wants to be carrying 6th, and then got on the power too early, and that's what caused the oversteer there, and that's why he is now abandoning that lap time. It looks like Aero Specialist is on a lap though for Alpine. Was a little bit wide coming out of that second chicane, but he's now coming into the middle sector, and let's see if he can take this next left-hander right. As you can see, coming into here, just shifting down 3 times. He goes all the way down to fourth gear, and I'm not actually sure if he's on a lap. I don't think he is actually on a lap, although the game is saying that he is. But yeah, at this point of the session, we have about 7 minutes left to go, and so far we've seen 5 drivers get into the 16s, and 2 drivers haven't set a lap time yet. So do you think, what do you think could be the pole time here? Do you think we could see some drivers getting into the 1 minute 15s?
I would certainly hope that maybe, I would like to see a driver get into the 15s, because it just proves that there is always room for improvement in qualifying. And maybe if a couple of drivers get in there, it'd be a great showing for either driver who can. I do believe it is possible that the 15 is possible. In this tier, so I would, like I said, I hope someone would get into it. I'm expecting some really close times for pole.
Yeah, and like we've seen, we've had quite a few short tracks so far, obviously, and there's a spin there for a specialist in the first sector. But we've had quite a few short tracks at this stage in these first 4 rounds of the season. Obviously, Miami was probably the longest one so far, but then we've had Austria, we've had Brazil, and now we arrive at Imola. All tracks that have lap times under 1 minute and 20 seconds in the qualifying, at least. So, we've seen a lot of invalidations, we've seen a lot of track limit penalties, and we've also seen some very close qualifying sessions, like you were saying. So right now, obviously, pole only separated by 1/10 of a second, a 16.3 for Gabri in the Williams, and a 16.4 for the Alpine driver of Racing Bomber. So it's already very, very close between the top 2. And then there's only about a 4/10 difference down to Rich 500 in the McLaren, down in P5. So it's already quite close. All the drivers still have at least one more lap time to set in the session, as we're reaching the 5-minute mark. We only have 5 minutes left to go in the session, so I think the drivers will be making their way back to the pit lane. They're just going to stay in there for a little while, wait until about the 3-minute mark before getting out when the track evolution is at its best, when they have the most grip going into the turns and they can make up all the time that they need. But you can see one man going out quite early, and that's MFC Trunders coming out of the pit lane for Alfa Romeo. And you can see he's trying to get out ahead of the traffic, but he could have timed this quite badly, actually, because there's a possibility that when he's coming to cross the line, that people are going to be coming out of the pit lane to set their final laps of the session. Hopefully that doesn't happen, and that he can get a nice clean run in. But yeah, the timing could be a little off for him. You can see another man going out quite early is Racing Bomber. 4 minutes left to go in the session. He's just begun his final outlap. So do you think some of these drivers are trying to get 2 laps in and over-fueling their cars so they can get that second lap in and just try and push as much as they can before the end of the session?
I would think so, because like some of these people feel like they could improve massively, and Imola is a tricky track. It is easy to spin off on a lot of these corners. For example, like turn 1 and turn 2 is incredibly tricky. The double right-hander in sector 2 is also incredibly difficult for some drivers. So maybe just kind of trying to compensate for possible mistakes and getting 2 laps in if they can improve where they might mess up on their first lap. Even if they get 2 successful laps in, they can improve. They know where to improve, and they can quickly do it on the fly.
Yeah, definitely. I'd have to agree with that. But one interesting thing that I've just noticed, I'm not sure if this is a game glitch or not, but Racing Bomber has decided to go out on worn soft compound tires. These tires have already been through a heat cycle. They're 1 lap old, and that could be possibly him saving a fresh set of soft compound tires for the race. But you can see the exact thing I thought would happen has happened. There's a driver, the McLaren of Rich 500, just coming out of the pit lane as Racing Bomber begun his lap time. Thankfully, there was enough space between him for Rich to get out of the way. So Racing Bomber continues on with his lap time. And let's see how fast he can go. Obviously, these are worn tires, so this might not be the most representative time. So he might be sacrificing quali for a better race strategy. Obviously, the mandatory two-stop rule here in one-hub racing. So maybe we could be seeing a soft, medium, or any order of those tires. But yeah, you can see now coming into this final sector, he's 8/100ths down on his time, and he goes very wide into the chicane there, missing the first apex. And I think that's going to be this lap time over. I don't think he's going to be able to improve on this one, sadly. So he might be going for a second lap time, though. And as he does, ERT Jordan is actually going out on a lap on 4-lap-old soft compound tires. You can see most drivers are actually using worn tires. One person who isn't using worn tires, though, is the McLaren driver of Rich 500. He's going to have the advantage of the fresh soft compound tires. So let's see how fast he can go, and could be battling for pole position here, because a fresh tire advantage is about 3 to 5 tenths around this Emilia-Romagna circuit. So let's see, you can see coming out of the first sector, he is 7/100ths up on his time. He's going to need to find quite a bit more improvement in these final two sectors if he wants to be battling for pole position. Let's see if he can do just that, missing the apex there and going into that left-hander, possibly to try and get a better exit, which he does now into Acqua Minerale. Doesn't use the full width of the track on entry, as you can definitely get quite an easy track limits warning there, which is not what you want. Coming into the chicane now in the final sector, 3/10 up on his time, if I'm not mistaken, as he's only got 2 more turns to go in this lap. And let's see if he can get that 16.3 that he needs into the final 2 turns, hitting that apex very nicely, using the full width of the track on apex on both turns. That's a very good exit out of there, and across line, it's going to be a good time. Is it good enough for pole position? Yes, it is. It's a 16.1. That puts him on provisional pole position. Gabri is currently on a lap, but you can see going wide into that left-hander there. That's going to cost him a lot of time and possibly pole position in this race. You can see it's not been a good line, and I think they've actually abandoned that lap time there. ERT Thomas almost 2/10 up coming out of the first sector. Can he find any more improvement in this middle sector? Well, we're about to find out. No, he can't actually. He's 1.2 down coming out of the middle sector, so it does not look like he is going to be able to improve on his time. Is Lawrence improving? No, Lawrence is down on his time. Pricey goes P2 with a 16.2, 1.5 tenths off of pole position. It's very close here at the top. Gabri cannot improve. Can Racing Bomber improve on 2-lap-old soft compound tires? They're going to be losing quite a bit of grip, but maybe he can just drive as well as he can and find that extra little bit of time. But it looks like he's abandoned his time. ERT Thomas cannot improve. Lawrence is 3/10 down and invalidated his lap time. Jordan isn't improving. Ulls is not improving. Trundler's in the pit lane. Salty has abandoned his lap. Aero Specialist is in the pit lane. And that means Rich 500, the McLaren driver, is going to be starting on pole position for his first race here in the P3 tier. And by a 1/10.5 at a short circuit. So, wow, what do you think of his performance there? As a Salty Bear actually goes P4. Sorry, I thought he abandoned his lap time.
Rich was definitely a surprise. Obviously, hasn't really. Hasn't. I think this is his first race of the season. He has come in, and just like Pricey did in Austria, he's come in and he's kind of put everyone on notice and sort of put his name, like I said, put his name in the hat as another contender. And if he can, if he takes this into the race, possibly gets himself into a podium spot or even a win, he can definitely put himself up there as a contender for the rest of the season.
He definitely could, and with such a great qualifying performance like that, he's done pretty much what Pricey did in Austria was for round 2. You know, he like he said, he's made himself known. He's trying to prove a point here, and he could do the exact same thing as Pricey did in Austria, but he's got one man to battle with on the front row, and that is Pricey. So you can see a 16.1, almost into the 15s for Rich. That's a very quick time from him. Pricey right behind him, just a 1/10.5 behind in P2. Gabri gets on the second row of the grid with a Salty Bear actually getting up into P4. Racing Bomber in P5 with ERT Thomas in P6. And actually, if you notice, the gap from P1 to P5 is just 0.3 of a second. So, yeah, you were dead right thinking that this was going to be quite a close qualifying session, as it definitely was. And we'll be able to see the rest of the grid on the race start, as there is no formation lap due to the tire temperature glitch, which I think has actually been bugged. I haven't actually experienced it in quite a while, but I think for now we are just going to play it safe without the formation lap. So it's going to be an interesting race start, because the drivers are all going to be thrown into it. And just before we get this race underway, I'd like to mention one of OneHub's racing sponsors, and that is Next Level Racing. They provide some great sim racing gear, including play seats and cockpits, with which they make very, very good play seats and cockpits. So if you want to go check them out, there will be a link in the description. And I think they're definitely worth checking out if you're considering getting either a play seat or a cockpit. And it's probably where I'll be getting my next cockpit. But we're getting ready for the race now. You can see we have 10 seconds until the first red light comes on. So hopefully this should be an interesting race. I'm hoping that all the drivers can keep it clean off of this race start. But coming into the turn 1 and 2 chicane, where it's so tight, it's going to be difficult. But you can see we have 5 red lights. They're gone and we're away. What kind of start is it for our pole man, Rich 500? It looks like a decent one up against M. Pricey, but it's an even better one for Gabri. Already moving alongside Rich coming into turn 1. Looks to the outside and he manages to get that move done. Or does he? No, he goes deep into turn 1 and manages to actually lose a couple of positions, falling down to P5 and then having a spin out of the chicane. So Gabri, who started P3, is now all the way down in P14. It's been the worst start possible. The only spinner so far on lap 1. And after having such a good start off the line, she's going to be disappointed with that one. M. Pricey right on the back of Rich 500. And A Salty Bear is actually P3 and currently on the podium for Red Bull. You can see Pricey almost pushing Rich through the turns there, as getting a very good exit out of Aqua Minerali. Will you be looking for a move into the chicane? I think the answer is no. It's very, very difficult to go side by side into this turn. So he just tries to keep it on track, as it looks like M. Pricey, Rich and Ace Salty Bear all struggling out of there, getting some wheel spin. Ace Salty Bear actually went off track there. But M. Pricey managing to stay in the 1 second gap of Rich ahead on lap 1, and that is going to be useful once lap 3 ticks around. You can see Rich 500 leading after lap 1, but taking a quick look at the position changes, it's been a great start for Cyanex, who moves all the way from P13 to P6 as Racing Bomber goes down the inside of Lawrence and moves himself up into P4. And this now allows Cyanex to look to the inside coming into the second chicane, and he has the outside line for the second apex and he cannot make that move work. Meanwhile, M. Pricey has DNF from the session. He's had a spin on the exit of the second chicane and he's now out of the session, and this has now caused a virtual safety car. So wow, the man who is battling for P1 in this race is out on lap 2. That's got to be gutting for M. Pricey.
Definitely, it's such a huge shame after you've shown good pace in qualifying and also good pace in the race. He's got to be. I can completely understand if he is completely devastated by that. Yeah, all he's got to do now is try and forget about it, move on to next week, and try and bounce back.
Yeah, and hopefully he can. It's always rough when you DNF in the first 3 laps, and especially after being within that 1 second gap of Rich ahead of him. But the drivers are now all under the virtual safety car conditions, and you can see the drivers taking this opportunity. We didn't even get to look at the tyre strategies because they're already boxing for fresh tyres. It looks like a lot of people started on the soft tyres. A couple of guys starting on the medium compounded tyres. But we're now going to see what the tyre strategies are like after lap 2. You can see Racing Bomber leading this race with Cyanex behind him. They're both on soft compound tyres. ERT Jordan, Speed Quinn and MFC Trunders are on the mediums, with Alls and Gabri on the softs. But out of all the people who just boxed, Rich, a Salty Bear and Aero Specialist opting for the medium compound of tyres, with Lawrence, ERT Thomas and Hooky all going on to the hard compound of tyres. There's a lot of different tyre strategies going on amongst the drivers. I think if you started on the soft tyres, it definitely would have been the right strategy to box under that virtual safety car. It would have gained you probably about 10 seconds or so. Definitely would have gained you a lot of time, but you can see Racing Bomber, Cynex, Alls and Gabri all opting against that. Obviously, I think Gabri was kind of looking for track position over time gain there, as fell all the way down to P14 on that first lap. You can see MFC Trunders currently putting Speed Quinn under a bit of pressure, as Racing Bomber sets the fastest lap of the Grand Prix on lap 3. But yeah, Speed Quinn, one of the people who took the engine penalty this race, is already back up to P5, but about half of the grid has made a pit stop, as Gabri, making a decent recovery so far, sets the fastest lap of the Grand Prix on the soft compound of tyres. MFC Trunders having a little moment out of turn 2 there, losing a bit of time to Speed Quinn ahead. And ERT Jordan, who's actually on the medium compound tyres, is now putting a little bit of pressure under the man in P2. That is Cynex. Speed Quinn has a spin coming up the hill out of that left-hander, and that could have been from wheel spin or touching the curb on the inside. And you can see really struggling with the tyre temperatures, as they're probably through the roof right now, and spins the car once again. And you can see the people who boxed under the virtual safety car have now completely gained that pit stop advantage, and you can see not taking it cautiously at all. And when your tyre temps are through the roof, you need to play it safe going into these turns, and Speed Quinn has now learned that the hard way. So Speed Quinn is now all the way down in P12, and is also a pit stop down on the drivers around them. Hooky, I think, actually had a spin as well, because he's now 9 seconds as the Delta updates. About 8 seconds off of Speed Quinn. It looks like Cynex is looking to the inside at turn 1. A bit of a wheel spin moment there coming out of turn 2. He's now lost to DRS to Jordan ahead of him, who makes that move and moves himself up into P2, with the mediums possibly being better than the softs at this stage. Cynex now under pressure from the Red Bull of Alls, and coming up the hill now into his left-hander. Alls has the outside line, the more flowing line, gets the better traction and moves himself up into P3. So Cynex losing 2 positions in just one sector. That's pretty brutal for him. But right now, obviously looking at these tyre strategies, it's very difficult to tell who's on the right one. But if you had to pick a couple of drivers who you think are on the right strategy, who would you pick? The guys who haven't boxed on softs and mediums, or maybe the guys who boxed under the virtual safety car on mediums and hards?
I believe Rich made the right choice of going into the pits under the VSC, because just in general, getting a free, when we have a mandatory 2-stop rule, getting that free pit stop in a safety car or a virtual safety car, it can do you the world of good, especially in a track like Imola, where you can go just from mediums to hards in a normal race without the 2-stop rule. So I believe all the drivers that followed Rich into the pits have all made the right decision.
I definitely have to agree with you here, and we're now going to actually be able to see how much time was lost not boxing under the virtual safety car. Cynex coming into the pit lane for a fresh set of medium compound tyres. We're going to be able to see where this puts him out relative to Rich 500, who was obviously the race leader. And you can see there's quite a big gap there. That's about 15 seconds or so to Rich ahead of him. If we take a look at the leader gap here, the exact gap is actually 13 seconds. Yeah, I was right there. Sorry. Looking at the wrong gaps there. So yeah, 13 seconds lost after not boxing under the virtual safety car, and obviously some of that was up to Rich being on the fresher compound of tyres. But yeah, that's a lot of time lost for Silex, and that's a bad sign of things things to come for all the people currently in the top 5 with a pit stop yet to make. 2 pit stops yet to make, actually, for everyone in the top 5. And you can see a Salty Bear hasn't really been up there, hasn't really been challenging for race wins, for podiums, even top 5s. But you can see now he's actually keeping the pace with Rich 500 ahead of him. And he's not being totally carried by the DRS, because obviously there's only one DRS straight on this entire track. So he's showing a good pace here in Imola, keeping up with who is the net race leader. Rich only 22 seconds off of Racing Bomber, so it's actually going to be quite close when Racing Bomber comes out of the pits for his first stop. You can see a Salty Bear out of the second chicane, the inconsistency creeping in there, goes into the gravel and loses quite a bit of time there. But he is on the right strategy along with Rich. And yeah, it's an interesting one actually from ERT Thomas and Lawrence D. They opted to go for the hard tyres, and obviously, like you said, without that 2-stop rule, it's just a medium hard race. And since the virtual safety car came out so early, that's pretty much the strategy they're going to be running. So Lawrence obviously is taking the pain now on those hard compound tyres, which are quite slow here at Imola. But once it gets later on the race, he will be getting on those medium compound tyres, which will give him quite a bit of pace until the end of the race. But you can see Racing Bomber keeping up a good pace relative to ERT Jordan, and also keeping pace with Rich. So interesting to see Racing Bomber on old soft tyres is keeping up with Rich, who's obviously 5 laps of wear on those medium tyres, but the medium tyres deal with that tyre wear better. So do you think Racing Bomber and Rich and maybe Salty Bear will be battling it out for this race win?
Possibly, because it seems like Racing Bomber is keeping the pace that he might be able to make. He might be able to not have lost so much on Rich from not pitting under the virtual safety car by keeping those softs on and keeping his pace consistent. He might be able to. But if he pits now, he will be on 5-lap fresher tyres, and he'll be able to and hopefully that will carry him to give they'll give him the advantage to make up the time that he would have lost in the pit stop as well. So I think Racing Bomber could be up there. Ols could be up there, I think, as well, possibly, if he just keeps his pace consistent. He seems to putting Jordan under a bit of pressure. So I'll just have to see how them two get on once they come out from their pit stop.
Yeah, and obviously Racing Bomber has to make that second stop as well. So once he comes into pit lane, he'll be probably 2 seconds behind Rich and the Salty Bear, but he'll have the fresher tyres to make up for it. And obviously, with him not boxing under that virtual safety car, that now means he can use the softer compounded tyres. He can go from softs to mediums, or soft to medium to soft. And Rich has to go from mediums to the hards. But you can see the clouds getting quite thick in the sky, and it's getting a little bit darker here in Italy, and that could be rain on the forecast. Obviously we don't know, but it definitely could be coming quite soon. And could we see intermediate conditions? And maybe that's why people like Racing Bomber, ERT Jordan are staying out. Maybe they're trying to extend their first stint until the rain comes. But I don't think that's the case, as Racing Bomber comes into pit lane. And as he does, MFC Trunders is looking to the inside into the final turn, gets the better exit over Alls, but it doesn't matter too much because Alls now comes into the pit lane for what will either be softs or mediums. ERT Jordan going from the mediums to the hards, so he's probably going medium, hard, soft, or something along the lines of that. Lawrence D, I'm sorry, I actually forgot to mention him there. Had a spin going through turn 1 and 2, and then had another spin in the second chicane. That is why he is all the way down in P13. You can see Racing Bomber comes out roughly 5 seconds behind who are the net leaders in this race. So it's not the smallest gap, but it's also not the biggest gap. And he's got his teammate for company right behind him. So hopefully the two Alpine drivers can work together to catch up to the McLaren and the Red Bull in a net P1 and 2. ERT Jordan, though, interesting to see him on the hard compounded tyres. And if he's going onto those hards, I don't think we'll be seeing rain in this race unless it's going very, very late on. And that's actually why he's put on those hard tyres. But let's say that there isn't going to be rain coming. Why do you think ERT Jordan has actually picked those hard compound tyres after starting on mediums?
I think it's just because we've seen a lot of drivers do this so far this season, that they've sometimes opted to go for a set of hards rather than a set of mediums. I think it's just because the hards they wear out a lot less, obviously, but once they get all warmed up, once they get to their kind of prime performance, they might actually feel a lot better than mediums in this kind of in a situation like this where you've got the two stop, and it'll allow drivers to go from the hards straight to the softs at the end of in the last 10 laps of the race. So I think that's why a lot of drivers might opt for hards in this kind of at this time in a race.
Yeah, and that could definitely be a good strategy from ERT Jordan. Obviously, about 7.5 seconds behind Racing Bomber. But if he gets onto those soft compound tyres on the end, he could be able to gain some time. Although, I think Racing Bomber is going for soft, medium soft. But the only problem with that is, compared to ERT Jordan at least, is that his soft tyres and his medium tyres at the end of their stints are going to be quite worn compared to what ERT Jordan's tyre wear is going to be. But at the start of lap 11, the gap between Rich 500 and Racing Bomber was 4.5 seconds. And now, as we enter lap 12, it's come all the way down to 2.9 seconds. That means Racing Bomber has gained 1.6 seconds in just one lap time. So that just shows you the advantage of 7-lap fresher tyres. But one of the problems is that Racing Bomber's red light is actually flashing, and that's because he's only on 5% ERS, so he's very, very low on the barrier. You can see he's obviously been pushing it quite hard to try and keep pace and catch up to the two drivers ahead of him, but it's going to cause him a lot of difficulty once he actually does, because Imola, tracks like Imola in Brazil are notorious for their recharge rate, as you recharge about 2% per lap around Imola, unless you go for a very low downforce setup, in which case you're going to be a lot slower in all of these high speed and medium speed turns. But you can see, I think he's actually, no, that must have been a mistake there from a Salty Bear, because he's just caught 1.5 seconds on a Salty Bear, and he's actually now in the DRS. So that must have been quite a costly mistake there from a Salty Bear. Now 2 seconds off of Rich and got Racing Bomber in his DRS. MFC Trunders now comes into the pit lane. It'll be interesting to see what tyres he actually goes on to. You can see Racing Bomber still using his ERS, completely depleting it as he goes down to 0% ERS. So he just does not care about that ERS. He's just using it now to try and gain as much time as possible. But he's now in the DRS of a Salty Bear. He can maybe think about relaxing, calming down, staying in that DRS, just letting him drag along. Or he might be thinking, well, I've got the 7-lap fresher medium tyres. I need to get ahead now. The Red Bull, he's obviously not going to have as much pace with such a big tyre deficit. So we'll have to see if Racing Bomber is going to be able to pull that move off. And obviously, like we've said before, there's only one DRS zone at this track, and that is on the run down into turn 1, so we could see a move going into there. But meanwhile, while this battling is going on, we also have the two Williams drivers trying to drag each other along. Currently, at this stage of the race, they both have 3-second time penalties, so they've both been struggling quite a lot with the track limits, and they're actually the only two people to have 3-second time penalties at this stage, so they're obviously struggling quite a lot with that. 2.5 seconds is the gap between ERT Jordan and Gabri, so they're not too far off of a top 5 fight, but with those 3-second time penalties, it's really going to hurt them. And I think something worth noting, I actually saw it from both of them, is that they're running a special golden helmet. I think we'll be able to see it. Yeah, you can see with Gabri and Sinex, they're both running a special golden helmet for their home Grand Prix here in Italy. So that's quite nice to see. But yeah, at this stage of the Grand Prix, we've now seen what we're... Well, actually, sorry, before I say that, you can see the gap is now just 1 second between Rich 500 and the Salty Bear. So what Salty Bear is really showing what he's made of at this Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Like I said, we haven't really seen him battling for race wins, but he's now showing his pace, and he's now caught up to the DRS of Rich 500 on pace alone. So that is very quick pace from a Salty Bear. But what I was going to say is, now that we've seen the pace, how much quicker these 7-lap fresher medium tires are, and obviously Racing Bomber has a lot more flexibility with the strategy with having these fresher tires. Do you think he's going to be possibly your favourite for this race win over people like a Salty Bear, Rich 500 and his teammate Aero Specialist?
I think so, because I think he could have a really good chance, because he, like you said, he has a lot of versatility, and he can adapt really well to whatever may happen now. If the safety car comes out, he does have a set of hards to use. If he needs to stretch these out until a soft run, he can absolutely do that. So I wouldn't put it past Racing Bomber finding themselves up in the top steps by the end of this race.
Yeah, and you can see now, we now have a 4-man DRS train for this race lead. So that flexibility with the strategy you were talking about there with Racing Bomber, it's going to help him massively. Because, you know, he can go for that overcut over all these drivers, get onto those softs, like you said, for that final stint where he's just going to have absolutely mega pace. But, you know, I think one thing he needs to focus on now, he has the DRS of Bear ahead of him. Bear has the DRS of Rich ahead of him. So it's going to be quite difficult for Racing Bomber to overtake Bear. So I think, you know, one strategy that, or one approach he could take is saving the ERS. But it does not look like he's going to be doing that. He's been about below 10% ERS for the past, what feels like forever. But you can see he's trying to use this ERS. He's trying to find his way past the Salty Bear. He wants to be... well, I'm not sure if he wants to be P1 in this DRS train, or if he wants to be P2, which is obviously quite a beneficial spot to be in. You can see Rich's red light is flashing. Bear does a dummy to the inside, tries to scare Rich off of his line. Rich not falling for that one, though. Closes the door going into turn 1. But yeah, you can see with Racing Bomber using a lot of his ERS, it's putting Bear under quite a lot of pressure to try and use his ERS to actually defend from the Alpine driver. And since he's using his ERS to defend, that's getting him a lot closer to Rich going into turn 1, as you just saw there on lap 16. He was very close going into turn 1, but he didn't want to commit to that move. He just wants to stay second in this DRS train. I think out of the top 3, Salty Bear is probably managing his race the best. He's staying in P2, just getting the DRS off of Rich to defend from Racing Bomber behind. And he's also saving his ERS. Rich and Racing Bomber, they both have their red light flashing, but I think Bear is on about 20 to 25% ERS, so he's got a good bit more to play with. 15% might not seem like much, but it's quite a bit, as we actually see an interesting strategy. Rich has been leading this DRS train. He hasn't been getting the DRS off of any of the drivers behind him. Because obviously they're behind him. So he comes into the pit lane now, and he's opting for the hard compounded tires. So he's going for those hards. Obviously, like you said, Tom, that was the strategy that you predicted. He started the race on softs, but since he boxed so early for those mediums, his only real option was to go for hards later on in the race, and that's exactly what he has done. And that could definitely put him in a very bad spot compared to Racing Bomber. Only 7 laps on those medium compound tires, and if he takes them 14 laps like Rich, or maybe even longer, I think he can definitely get to a stage where he can use the soft compound tires, because obviously the softs around this track, they last about 8 laps if I had to guess. But you can see Racing Bomber, I was actually just about to say he's being a bit too aggressive, as he was going to look around the outside into that chicane, but actually thinks better of it as Aero Specialist on the exit of Aqua Minerale actually has a spin and loses about 10 seconds and is out of the battle for this win. But you can see Racing Bomber just overtook a Salty Bear there, going through the penultimate turn. He now moves himself up into P1, and this is playing perfectly into Bear's hands. He's really managing this race quite well. You can see he's got the overspeed. He can look to the outside if he wants to, and he actually does want to get past. So that's interesting from Salty Bear, who's been managing his race so well. I thought, maybe he'd stay in the DRS, allow Racing Bomber with the fresher tires to drag him along, save that ERS, and just have just a lot more battery towards the end of the race. But even though he's on worn tires, he's actually opted to go past Racing Bomber there. So do you think that's the right strategy from Bear to try and lead this race, maybe pull out a gap or maintain the pace?
Well, I'd say that maybe Salty Bear thinks he might be able to, if he gets to clean air ahead of Racing Bomber, he might be able to lose him in Sector 2 and 3 rather than try and lose him on the DRS straight. So I think that might be a strategy going forward. If he can pull, if he thinks he is faster than Racing Bomber throughout Sector 2 and 3, he can try and pull that second gap throughout the lap. But as you see, he's just had a bit of a moment coming out of the chicane. So he's right back in the danger zone with Racing Bomber having the DRS down the pit straight. And I think they have about the same ERS looking at the telemetry. So we're just going to see how this fight goes.
Yeah, and I think Racing Bomber obviously going full send. He's been sending the ERS. He's been making every move whenever he has the opportunity. And from our point of view, at least, I think this is some bad race management. But before I talk about that, it looks like Gabri making the move on ERT. Jordan has the softer compounded tires, but they're going to start to drop off soon. They are 12 laps old, and Gabri's red light is also flashing. He's got Jordan right behind him. He's got 75% ERS and hard compound tires, which are going to start to phase in quite nicely compared to the mediums. But what I was going to say was I think it's just bad race management from both these drivers. They both have the opportunity. Bear now is in P2. He has the opportunity to stay in the DRS of the driver with fresher tires, save up his ERS, manage his tires, and then go to the hards when he needs to, and have that extra ERS to try and catch up to obviously people like Rich and Racing Bomber once he comes into the pit lane. But maybe I'm thinking about that wrong, because obviously we don't really get to see the pace deficit when you're in the car, in the cockpit. Racing Bomber, who was in the car, he can feel if the driver in front of him is going too slow, if he's holding him up. And I think that's exactly what happened, because as soon as Racing Bomber got past in the DRS straight, he was able to pull away, and that has actually caused Salty Bear to come into the pit lane. But from a driver who's had great pace all day, he's been doing so well in this race, it's a bit of a strategy blunder from the Red Bull, I would have to say. Going on to these soft compound tires for the final 12 laps of the race, it just does not seem like something that is going to work out for him. But you can see, coming out of the pit lane, he comes out just in the middle of this battle. You can see banging wheels with his teammate, just leaving each other enough space there. He came out just in front of Rich, but Rich was obviously able to overtake him with Salty Bear having the cold soft compound tires, and he came out side by side with his teammate Alls. He looks to the inside now, coming into his left-hander. You can see pushing his teammate wide and gets up into P5. So he's now going to be chasing down Rich for these final 12 laps. But what I was saying about the tyre strategy is 12 laps on the soft compound tyres at any track just is not doable. They are going to fall off around lap 5. That's when they're going to start losing pace, and they'll be in puncture territory around lap 9 or 10. So do you think this is the right strategy from Salty Bear? Do you think he could possibly stretch these tyres until the end of the Grand Prix?
I definitely think it's a risky strategy. I think he might be hoping for a possible safety car, but we haven't seen one, and we haven't really seen any instance that can bring out a safety car so far this race. So we just have he might have really good. He might be able to stretch out the tyres and make sure they last 12 laps, or if he's just sending it and hoping that they don't blow up by lap 32. But he's hoping that whatever advantage they can give, he can get the most out of. So whenever the tyres do fall out of fall out of their pace, he will have enough time to compensate for that.
Yeah, and like you were saying about making most of these tyres, he really does need to do that, like I said before, they fall off. So he's already broken DRS to Rich. He got the DRS on this lap 21, and you can only assume he's trying to go for a fastest lap attempt there, try to get the fastest lap point while also pulling away from Rich behind him. But realistically, he's going to be in quite a bad position compared to Racing Bomber, because Racing Bomber, once he comes into pit lane, he'll be on fresh softs. Bear will be on worn softs, and Racing Bomber is just going to have that, a second and a half a lap compared to both Rich and Bear. So for me personally, I think my favourite for this race win has got to be Racing Bomber. But it's been quite the battle between the top three of the Alpine, the Red Bull, and the McLaren. As like I said there, Bear going for the fastest lap attempt and gets it job done, as AlphaTauri of Hooky, who took an engine penalty this race. He's not had the best strategy nor the best race. Currently P12 and a lap down. So definitely a race to forget for him, along with Lawrence having a couple of spins. Speed Quinn taking an engine penalty did not work out for them, and they're now trying to stretch the softs for a very long time here, unless they're going for another set of softs. We can see out of nowhere, actually, on the medium, not even mediums, warm medium compound tires, Lawrence D manages to snatch that fastest lap of the Grand Prix. So a Salty Bear, I assume one part of his strategy was to get onto those softs, get that fastest lap point. It hasn't worked out because the Ferrari driver of Lawrence has stolen that fastest lap away. You can actually see a lot of people in a lot of different positions. You can see the two Williams drivers not doing too well for themselves. The two Italian teammates not doing too great in this race. They're currently on hard compound tires until the end of the race. I don't think they'll be making up too many more positions, although Alls does have to come into the pit lane. We'll have to see where everyone filters out. You can see Thomas, the two Mercedes drivers have gone for quite a conservative strategy. I think they both started on the mediums, went to those hard compound tires, and they're now stretching them until they can go onto those soft tires until the end of the race. Thomas actually boxed under the virtual safety car, and that is why he is currently on the 20-lap-old hard compound tires. So it's been an absolutely mega stint from ERT Thomas, but you can only assume he's going to be coming in for the soft compound tires and quite soon too. But right now there's no battles currently on track. Right now I think the main focus is the gap between Racing Bomber and a Salty Bear. So Salty Bear has already pulled out about 5 seconds a gap to Rich behind, so he's really making the most of these soft tires compared to Rich behind him. And then the gap to Racing Bomber is 25.9 seconds. So is Racing Bomber going to come out ahead of a Salty Bear? And now if Racing Bomber comes out ahead of Salty Bear on fresh soft compound tires, there is absolutely no hope of anyone but Racing Bomber winning this race, because he is going to have the fresher tire. He's obviously had the better pace this race, and he's also going to have the track position. But it's going to be quite close between the two drivers. A Salty Bear might just edge him out. As you can see, coming out of the pit lane, it's the Alpine driver. He comes out of the pits, and a Salty Bear gets that track position. So you can see, I think before the pit stops, a Salty Bear was just outside 1.5 seconds behind Racing Bomber. And after the pit stops, he's now going to be about 2 seconds ahead. So he has gained 3.5 seconds with this undercut strategy. But the only problem is now is that he is going to have absolutely no pace, and Racing Bomber is just going to absolutely fly by. We could even see Rich overtaking Salty Bear for P2 in this race if Salty Bear doesn't get a tire puncture. But you can see Racing Bomber is already starting to make up time. The gap was 2.2 seconds. It is still 2.2 seconds, but you can see coming into the chicane how much time he's about to gain. Although he actually misses the apex there slightly, isn't opting to take as much sausage curb going into that chicane, which is really what you want to do to make your line as wide as possible and carry as much speed and get that better exit. But you can see now, this is going to be Racing Bomber's first lap in anger on these soft compound tires. So let's just ride on board and see if he can get into the DRS of Salty Bear and possibly get the fastest lap while he's at it. So you can see on the run now, down into turn 1, braking nice and late coming into here, carrying 4th gear through here, and you can see the speed that he's carrying with these soft compound tires, just so fast through those 2 turns. You can see now into the 2nd chicane here, hitting those apexes quite nicely, and then getting a good exit out of there, up the hill into this left-hander, very tight line, but just missing the curb on the inside while using a little bit of that curb on the outside. But we now come into this very tricky left-hander at very high speeds. You can see almost going wide there, but just about keeping it within the track limits, pushing them to the absolute limit into Aqua Minerali. You can see a little bit of oversteer on that exit as he actually uses 3rd gear out of that turn, so very risky going into there. We now come into the chicane in the final sector, takes that very nicely actually, gets a good exit out of there, also using 3rd gear. So you can see Racing Bomber obviously likes to use those lower gears to try and get that best possible traction. Now into the final 2 turns, you can see he's gained about 1.5 seconds on a Salty Bear ahead of him, and across the line, or just 1 second actually, and across the line, is it going to be the fastest lap? No, it's actually not. So Racing Bomber, it didn't actually, it looked like a decent lap, but apparently it just was not fast enough to beat Lawrence's time on the mediums. ERT Jordan now comes into pit lane for the soft compound tires, and ERT Thomas on 23 lap old tires is surely going to be having to come in soon for those soft compound tires. But yeah, Salty Bear, you can see the pace drop off compared to Racing Bomber and Rich isn't bad, that bad just yet. He's on 6 lap old soft compound tires. So do you think this strategy could work out better than we expected?
Possibly, because yeah, like you said, he's not losing a big amount of time to him. He's losing probably. He's not losing too much time throughout the lap. So maybe his pace is consistent enough, even with the one soft where he's keeping Racing Bomb behind him. Once Racing Bomber's tyres start to fall off in a couple of laps' time, I think they might both be driving at the same pace. So Salty Bear might have made the right decision here.
Yeah, and I thought it was an absolute strategy blunder with the Salty Bear, but he's obviously been managing his tyres, managing his ERS, and now that Racing Bomber has box, he's starting to use a bit more of that ERS, using a little bit more of that tyre life. And I think one of the problems is Racing Bomber has had the pace this entire race and in qualifying too, but now when it comes to his final crucial stint on soft compound tyres, he doesn't have the pace. He has the tyre advantage, and he just does not have the pace to keep up, and that could be to do with his ERS management. Obviously, like we've seen this race, he doesn't really care about the ERS, just absolutely sends it out of every exit, and that obviously hasn't worked out for him because he's now got about 30% less ERS in a Salty Bear, and that could be what's keeping the Red Bull driver ahead of the Alpine. But while Racing Bomber tries to get into the DRS of Bear, which he's actually quite close to now, his teammate Aero Specialist is sitting in the DRS of Rich 500. The only thing about that is Aero Specialist has a 3-second time penalty, so even if he does get up into those podium positions on track, he will be falling right back down to P4. So I think he's just trying to stay in that DRS of Rich ahead of him, make sure that Gabri doesn't catch up, and especially not ERT Jordan, who's actually on those soft compound tires. He's going to have a lot of pace at this stage. You can see he's already showing that pace because he is now caught up to the back of Gabri, and it's most likely, actually no, does not get the DRS for this next straight. So you can see coming onto this pit straight, as we come to the line, he's not going to be able to open that DRS just outside of that 1 second gap. Although Aero Specialist is one man who was in the DRS, he goes down the inside into turn 1 and 2, and I think Rich just played that quite cautiously. He does not need to battle that. Aero Specialist has a penalty, even if he finishes ahead on track, he will be finishing behind after his 3-second time penalty is applied. So I think Rich is just hanging back in that DRS. Some good race management here, although he really needs to keep within that DRS, as lost about 5/10 after Aero Specialist overtook him. So Rich has not had the best pace on these higher compound tires. Someone who we thought could possibly win this race, just was not the best on this final stint. But you can see now Salty Bear's tyres 8 laps old. That means they're going to be around 40% tyre wear, which is quite bad, especially for the soft compound tyres. So Racing Bomber is now in that DRS, and Racing Bomber, being Racing Bomber, he's going to absolutely send the ERS at every opportunity. So he's going to be gaining a lot of time on this straight, as you can see, gaining quite a bit of time there. But the Salty Bear still has quite a bit of ERS left in the tank, and we only have 4 laps of racing to go. So all Salty Bear needs to do is just use that ERS strategically on each straight, and he could see himself finishing P1 in this Grand Prix over Racing Bomber. And yeah, that's something to actually talk about. Do you think Salty Bear has the better approach with the ERS, conserving it and then using it strategically on every straight to just about keep ahead of Racing Bomber, or do you think it's a better strategy to just use the ERS at every opportunity? If you've still got some left, well, why aren't you using it?
I think there's definitely a possibility that Salty Bear has done it correctly here, because yeah, as we've seen all throughout the race, Racing Bomber, although it's creating a lot of exciting moves, a lot of overtakes, a lot of stuff that we all like to see in racing, he's using a lot. He's using his ERS every single time down that straight, maybe not really having enough, never really having enough. So if he does get that move done, he can't really defend in any other area of the track. Meanwhile, Salty Bear, he saves his, and if he can use it in another part of the track where he thinks he can make a move, he has it available.
Yeah, and as we see now, Racing Bomber sending his ERS like he always does, 0% on his ERS, but he manages to get past Salty Bear. But yeah, that's a very good point that you brought up. Now that Racing Bomber is ahead, he's got nothing to defend with. He can't use his ERS to defend because he doesn't have any. So I think Bear's main job here is to just stay within that DRS. Although, as you can see there, 2 snaps of oversteer on the exit of the final, or the last 2 turns he just took. It's going to be a big struggle to keep within the DRS, because you can see going into there just the understeer that he has. He just does not have the grip going into these turns. So maybe it could have been a better strategy for Salty Bear to use that ERS while he was ahead to try and maintain that track position, because now that Racing Bomber is ahead, he has a lot more grip than Salty Bear does, and it'll be interesting to see, can Salty Bear even get it into the DRS on this pit straight? It's going to be absolutely crucial, and he just about does. Going into this turn, the gap is 8.5 tenths, so he's going to have the DRS for this straight, but we can now see that he's really struggling in the turns. He doesn't have the pace to keep up with Racing Bomber, so maybe Racing Bomber favouring that track position and then just relying on his pace rather than the ERS is going to work out for him. You can see the gap is 5 tenths. Salty Bear has 2 more laps to try and overtake Racing Bomber, and only 1 more DRS straight to do so, which is going to be at the end of this lap 31, start of lap 32. But you can see going into there, he's just got no grip. He actually manages to give himself a 3-second time penalty. So Salty Bear doesn't have the grip. The soft tires are absolutely gone. They're going to be around 75% puncture territory for Salty Bear. And yeah, like I said before, stretching these soft compound tires for 12 laps, no matter how good it looks for the first 8, it's never going to work out in the final 4, because you just lose so much tire grip. And you can see he's lost about 2.5 seconds in 1 lap alone. And he's just taking it very cautiously now. This is allowing Aero Specialist to gain quite a bit of time. Rich is also going to be trying to push quite hard, because if Rich can get within that 3-second gap of Salty Bear, he could be gaining another position. But an interesting thing to see is that Aero Specialist has 3 seconds of time penalties, as you can see there. He's got 3 seconds of time penalties, and he's almost broken the 3-second gap to Rich behind him. So he just needs to push extra hard on this final lap, and he could be seeing himself on the podium in this immediate Romanga Grand Prix. You can see that Speed Quinn coming out of the pit lane there, obviously boxed on what for Speed Quinn would have been laps 30. Now laps 31 for Speed Quinn, but the fact that they're a lap down means they won't be able to get that final fastest lap attempt in. You can see Salty Bear has lost about another 2 seconds already 4.2 seconds is the gap. Aero Specialist, though, coming out of the second chicane, has a spin and falls all the way down to P5 and is now going to have to defend from Gabri. Gabri does have 6 seconds of time penalty, so ERT Thomas is pushing nice and hard on the soft compound tires. He could gain the position off of Aero Specialist if he gets within that 3-second gap, but can Rich, now getting into the 3-second gap of a Salty Bear, possibly get a last second podium? 4/10 is the gap. He's got a lot more grip coming into the chicane. It's 3.3 off of the exit. It's 3.2. It's now 3 seconds. He's in that 3-second gap. Can he be looking at a P2 in this race? Meanwhile, Racing Bomber is going to come across the line to win the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. P1 for the Alpine driver and a max 20 points. The Salty Bear comes across the line and it's P2 for now, but does Rich overtake him? Yes, he does. The McLaren driver in his debut here in P3 tier gets P1 and finishes P2. It's definitely a race to be happy with. ERT Jordan manages to snatch P4 off of Aero Specialist, who falls down to P5 after that late mistake. ERT Thomas, the two Mercedes drivers, doing quite nicely for himself with a nice P4 and 6. Gabri and Synex, the two Italian William drivers, finishing P7 and 8. Alls finishing down in P6, with Lawrence in P10 and Speedquin finishing a lap early as they were trying to go for a fast lap attempt, but didn't factor in that boxing would put them a lap down and finishes P11 and outside of the points. But yeah, a great race. Not a lot of overtakes, but I think this race was less about overtakes and a lot more about strategy. And obviously Racing Bomber had that better strategy. How well do you think he managed that race?
Pretty well. It seemed like he just knew when to pit, and I think we were talking about it earlier when he said he had a lot of versatility options. He could have gone to the hard if he ever wanted to. He could have stretched the mediums out to soft, and he did the latter, and it worked out entirely for him. And he managed to pull out the win because of it.
Yeah, a great race from him, and he's going to be pretty happy with himself, getting his first win here in the P3 tier after showing some great pace in what was pre-season. He actually won the pre-season race, but obviously that doesn't count for championship points. So he manages to get his first race win and the first full 20 points in the P3 tier here at round 4, and that is going to end off what is the half point of the season. So only 4 more rounds to go, and it's going to be quite close between all of these drivers. Obviously, crucial that people like Gazaman, Kong Hoffner miss this race and they lose a lot of points to people like Racing Bomber scoring the full race win points. But yeah, you can see from starting P5, it was a great race to get make up those positions. He decided not to box under the virtual safety car. It really worked out for him having that flexibility on the strategy. And then with the Salty Bear trying to stretch the soft compound tires for 12 laps, it just did not work out for him. You can see Salty Bear missing out on P2 by 0.5 of a second by the McLaren driver, who gets P2 on his debut. ERT Jordan moving up 4 positions after starting P8. Aero Specialist started P5, or P11 I should say, and moved all the way up to P5. But after that race, who would you have to give your driver to the driver of the day to?
I think I'll have to go with Rich because in his debut race he seemed to pull off a pretty flawless strategy. Didn't really have any problems in the race whatsoever, and he managed to find himself in P2 after looking a bit out of it, but luckily taking advantage of the soft tyres of Salty Bear especially falling off very quickly. He managed to get himself back up into those podium places. And I think my question would be, did you always have that strategy in mind, or did you have to change it on the fly?
Yeah, and obviously Rich in his debut, a great race from him all the way, getting that pole position in the first qualifying session that he participated in, and then finishing P2. But for me, it's got to be, it's very, very close between Salty Bear and Racing Bomber, because obviously Racing Bomber was just going full flat out all the time. He was making great calls with the tyre strategies, but I think his positioning on track and his ERS management just was not there. Whereas Salty Bear was a bit of the opposite. He had great pace throughout the race, great ERS management, but just that final tyre strategy call, he didn't have much of an option. But I think if he stretched those mediums just a few more laps, he could have been looking at a P1 finish. So I have to give it for Racing Bomber purely because of that after his great strategy. And my question for him would have to be, is this a track that you're stronger at? Obviously, you had great pace here. And coming into this race, you have a lot of confidence that you could possibly win. But that is going to be us. All from us here over at... Oh, sorry, we have to mention a few more sponsors. Yeah,
yes,
that's all right.
We have to kind of get through them all. I'll start off by going with shout out to one of our partners in my own team, ERT. Sponsors the league, going through from league trophies to the prize rewards. Also award the ERT Going Gets Tough award that it goes to a driver that completes all of their pre-race questions, finishes every race, just kind of shows that no matter what happens in a race, always keep going. And it is awarded at the end of the season to a driver who fits those requirements in each tier.
Another sponsor that we have over here at One Hub Racing is Pure Sim Gear, which is they make some great racing gloves. They also provide a free pair of racing gloves for the driver who has the most pole positions and fastest laps combined. So definitely go check them out. Link in the description. Hopefully you can check out their website and find the racing gloves that are right for you. Another sponsor that we have is Gamer Goo. They provide a great product. It's a cream that you can put on your hands to stop your hands from sweating if you ever get sticky hands on the controller or you're losing grip on your wheel. Well, both of those are great for gripping onto your wheel quite nicely. Definitely go check them out in the link in the description.
I'll carry on with going to another partner in Vespertine who create a lot of merch. They create hoodies, t-shirts, hats, caps, water bottles, all for One Hub Racing. And I'm sure there will be a link in description for all their socials, their website, everywhere you can buy their merch. And the final one, go for another partner in SimGrid. It's where the league is run. It's where we do all the sign-ups. You can look at all the current standings, all the rules, what the next race is. And so if you are interested in joining us, I do believe we have some tier spaces in a couple of tiers. Feel free to go check it out. I would highly recommend joining this league. As you can see, the races from these past few weeks, races have been very exciting all the time. So yeah, that'll be it.
Yeah, and I think I actually noticed there's actually 2 free spaces here in the P3 tier. But obviously, with One Hub Racing, there is prize money, which also means there's a $5 entry fee. So if you want to go get yourself signed up, it's €5 to enter yourself, and you could find yourself possibly winning prizes or prize money. But that is going to be all from us after mentioning all of One Hub's racing sponsors and partners. I hope you enjoyed that race. It was definitely a bit of a slower race, but it's definitely good to have at least one of those per season where you're focusing on the strategy, who's going to come out on top. And after all of it, it looked like Racing Bomber is going to be your race winner. I hope to see you next week for round 5, which is going to be the third to last round. Not too many rounds to go to decide this championship, so make sure you tune in for the final 3. But I think it's now about 20 past 8 here in Ireland. So that means that the P1 tier will be live in just 10 minutes' time and on this Twitch channel, if I'm not mistaken. So definitely be sure to check it out if you want to see some more racing here in One Hub Racing. But that's going to be all from us. I hope you enjoyed, and see you next week at 7 o'clock on Friday night.